Bonjour. Bizhikiwag nandito nakaz, magazine nandute. Nisquaga miwiz aga eganing, nandunjaba. My Indian name is Little Herd of Buffalo. I'm from the Eagle Clan, and I come from Red Lake. My English name is Brett King, and I'm here to share my story with you today. From a young age, my grandmother made sure that I was immersed in our culture, engaging in ceremonies important to our people. I was dancing at powwows since I was able to walk, about 3 years old. I think my grandma got me a grass dance outfit. And I used to love dancing as a kid. She instilled a sense of spirituality within me from a very young age. She taught me how to offer a sema, tobacco, and always tried to remind me to be grateful for the little things in life. However, my life existed in a state of transition, moving on and off the reservation. I've been on and off the reservation my whole life, and it was rough. I remember, I think it was second grade at J.W. Smith Elementary School is when I encountered my first bouts with racism, and I think that's when my identity crisis started happening because I was raised in a traditional way to be, practice our ways and be native, you know. But in second grade, I encountered racism. I remember trying to go down to the lunchroom to eat breakfast, and these two white kids pointed at me and they told the teacher that I already ate. And I tried to go eat, and the teacher wouldn't let me eat. And that's when I knew that there are things in this world that we have to deal with, that we have to learn how to navigate. Me being a young kid, I was very upset, and this was back when they made you do the Pledge of Allegiance, right? And that day when they wouldn't let me eat breakfast, I didn't stand up for their Pledge of Allegiance. I was angry, I was upset because of the way they treated me, and I didn't understand racism at that time until I had that encounter. Going through that culture shock because I was living on the reservation, surrounded by my people, going to school with all natives, and then I go to a public school, and it's a culture shock. You're around a bunch of people that you're not used to. And, I think that's when my life started to kind of take a turn. I started trying to fit in to modern society, and I wanted to be accepted. So I started to, I guess you could say, assimilate to society, or I wouldn't say assimilate, I would say conform to societal norms. And, but anyway, back to the not standing up for the Pledge of Allegiance. Because I didn't stand up for their Pledge of Allegiance to the United States of America, their flag, I was placed in a EBD room, which is I believe it's an acronym for Educational Behavior Disorder. They placed me in a behavioral room because I wouldn't stand up for their Pledge of Allegiance. But I was just standing up for myself in a way, trying to take a stand at such a young age against this racism I was encountering, and I must have been about 8 or 9. And then when I got older, I guess as I became a teenager, I began to feel disconnected from my culture, my people, and my sense of place within this world. This external pressure, what I now understand as the lingering shadow of colonialism, it led me to search for belonging in all the wrong places through the use of illegal substances and negative relationships that created even more separation from my cultural roots. During this period of my life, I felt as if I was navigating, trying to compete with identities shaped by power, systems of power, colonialism, the carceral state, and even capitalism, I guess you could say. It demanded I become and like define myself as who I really wasn't, you know. And then this identity crisis led me down to a path of incarceration, you know. But on my journey to incarceration, through that journey that I took, you know, that 116 months that I spent in carceral systems, it helped me become who I am today because in there I found my culture again. You know, I started singing on the big drum. I started attending sweat lodges and, you know, trying to learn our language as much as I can. And I learned the basic prayer in Ojibwe, and I would always, you know, pray in Ojibwe as much as I could. And it helped me. It saved me. It really did. Our culture, our language, it saved me. And it helped me become who I am now. You know, my new path is education.
What was your life like for you growing up on a reservation?
Um, Life was okay. You know, I was raised by my mother and grandmother, and that's you know, we got strong Ojibwe women in our family, so you know how that goes. But
Come from a big family too.
yeah, you know, it was okay. You know, growing up in West End, you know,
Uh-huh.
both of us. Remember, I
Red
was
Lake. Shout out Red Lake.
coming to Auntie Lives and hanging out and shit. You know, but yeah, it was, you know, good until substance use started coming in into play. You know, we had a crack epidemic up there. Remember those days? It was rough. You know, the whole family became different. You know,
Yeah.
it was that's probably really when my life took a drastic turn. Was fifth grade summer, I believe, and that's when I was introduced to a life that I shouldn't have been doing.
With that being said, do you feel like old family members played a big role on your influence growing up?
Yeah, and I believe they did. You know, I love them and I care about them, and I don't hold anything against them. But you know, our role models growing up were basically hustlers. You know, we never had any positive male role models. Like all they did was do stuff they shouldn't have done, and that's what we thought was okay. So my father was never there. You know, I still love and care about him. You know, I love my dad, but he wasn't there for me growing up. So I had to look for a father figure or a role model, and then these role models that I did have were relatives, and you know I loved them, but they showed me how to sell dope and shit like that, you know, and it was like I thought that's what a man did because I didn't have any real male role model in my life. You know, I thought men sold dope and hustled and you know did all this stupid shit,
Yeah.
but that's really not how, or that's really not what a man does.
No. Okay, so what was school like for you at a younger age?
Well, on the reservation school when I was younger in elementary school, I was always I like to read. I remember I had a 12th grade reading level when I was in fifth grade, and I was always placed in this academic enrichment, they
Mm.
call it, when they put you in a separate computer room for the more intellectual students, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But then that's when my life took a drastic turn, was probably in sixth grade, whenever I was introduced to the fast life and I started to hustle and sell dope. That was crack cocaine. I was selling crack when I was 11 years old, which is crazy to me. That's shit that a kid shouldn't be exposed to or shouldn't even be around. But that's when I lost interest in school.
What was addiction like for you?
Well, growing up, started drinking when I was about 11 years old. I was always a taller kid, so everybody thought I was older than I was. But I drank a lot. I partied and smoked weed and shit like that. It's I was a alcoholic at a young age. I remember in high school when I was like 16, going on a 21-day bender and actually having going through DTs and shaking in bed from the withdrawals of alcohol. It was crazy.
Speaking of school and you going through it at a young age, when did you realize school wasn't in your best interest anymore?
Um, Probably middle school when I started selling crack cocaine. I started drinking a lot. I was exposed to the fast life and all that shit, and that's when I really lost interest in school. But then yeah, it was just being exposed to all that shit. You know,
Yeah.
that's when I thought that I was cool because I could make all this money doing selling dope, doing this, and this, and then being able to take care of my family like that. Like I was 11 years old and I always had a pocket full of cash. 11, 12, all through,
Uh,
my teenage years. I was always hustling and I was always able to take care of mom and my sisters, and like buy shit around the house if we needed it and just yeah, so it was crazy.
So I know we're talking about school. I want to get into the experience after you dropped out of high school and what was that like?
Well, I made it all the way to my senior year, and I think what kept me going was actually sports growing up. I played football
Yeah,
and basketball. I was more of a football player than a basketball player, but after I turned
I was a basketball player.
what was it, like 17, and then senior season, football season's over, and then I'm like, fuck this shit. I
Yeah.
just dropped out and became a severe alcoholic, man. It was crazy.
Did you feel like that
Played a major role for you getting a job after you dropped out of high school and not furthered your education?
Yeah, I remember dropping out when I turned 18, and then I actually went and got my GED, like about 8 months after I dropped out of high school. So I just went, took the test, got it, first try, got the GED, and then I ended up getting a job at Taco John's in Bemidji, and
Yeah.
I wasted 13 months of my fucking life at that place. Was trying to do the right thing, and I was still hustling on the side. I was selling weed at the time, that's when the good shit came around,
Yeah.
when the brick weed disappeared and then all the good,
The good drug came.
yeah. But I was still hustling, selling weed on the side right at a Taco John's. Shit, sometimes I'd have people pull up and meet me on, outside or whatever. And then, but yeah, I just tried to get a job. I tried to do the right thing and tried to live by societal norms.
what led you to incarceration and how many times have you been in prison?
I've been to prison twice in my life. The first time was when I was 20 years old. I kicked in a door and discharged a firearm at two people. It was pretty much a drug deal gone bad, and then I was charged with first degree burglary and 2 counts of second degree assault. I was convicted on May in May of 2015, and I was sentenced to 84 months for those charges. I was sentenced to 48 months for the first degree burglary, and then I was sentenced to a consecutive 36 months for the second degree assault, and then they ran another 36 months concurrent. So I was serving a total of 84 months at that time. 20 years old. I was locked up from 2014, December of 2014 to September of 2019, right? And then when I got out, I was trying to do the right thing. I had a job. I was working at a lumber mill in Cass Lake. I had a vehicle. Life was, going okay. I was trying to be a productive member of society or a productive citizen, trying to do the shit that a normal person does, right?
Yeah.
And then when I was looking for a place to live, I was trying to rent my own spot. I called this landlord and I told him like, hey, I got a job, I got this, I got the money to pay the rent, blah, blah, blah. And I said, do you rent the felons? And this motherfucker says, no, I have kids. And I'm like, I said, man, I got fucking kids too. What the fuck does that mean? And then at that point, I knew that society had this stigmatization of, or they had this stigma against justice impacted people or people who have been to prison. And that's when I was like, I got a case of the fuck it, you could call it. And I started selling dope again. I started selling meth again. I started selling meth and heroin. And then that's around when fentanyl first started coming to, up north, Bemidji, Red Lake. So I ended up selling dope again, hustling, going back to what I knew because I was doing it since I was a kid,
Uh-huh.
right? And anyway, I ended up becoming one of the main suppliers of fentanyl in northern Minnesota. I would say, nothing, I'm not proud of it. I can't believe I was selling that shit to my people. I think back and I was pretty much killing my people, right? But from September of 2019, I got out, right? And I was out for about 7 months. And then I got caught with, I think, like 40 grams of fentanyl and an ounce or two of meth. And I was charged with 2 counts of first degree sales. And they ended up dropping one, and I pled out to first degree sales, and I was convicted of that. And they gave me 90 months for that. It's 7 years. And I ended up serving that sentence, and I was just released in September 22nd of 2025, right? So I was locked up from 2020 to 2025. I've spent a total of 116 months of my life in carceral systems. And basically every 20th birthday, I got locked up when I was 20 and I got out when I'm 31 now. And that was how many times I've been in prison and what led me to incarceration and just trying to survive. You know what I mean? I went into survival mode, and that's really what led me to that, you know.
What was your prison experience like while you
Uh,
were incarcerated?
the first time, I was a young kid. I was 20 years old. It was cool. I didn't get down with no gangs. I just went in there by myself, I never had to be in a gang to get along in there. I was the first time it was really an adjustment process for me. When you get in there, it's crazy because E-House, right? It's you walk in and it's like 4 tiers and there's fucking bars and it's like you ever watch Shawshank Redemption?
Yeah.
Like all them bars.
Yeah.
And you're just sitting there and you got guys in the fucking walk by himself, so he's taking a shit. Things like that. It's like what the fuck. But
Yeah.
that was a crazy experience for me. It's something I'll never get. Like pulling up on that bus, going through them gates, and I'm like, holy fuck, like I'm inside this motherfucker now, and I used to drive by and be like, oh shit, look at that big ass wall of St. Cloud, because that's the intake prison. But that time I was young, I didn't really work on myself or try to dig deep and try to change. And the first time I honestly kind of knew, like, in the back of my mind, like, I'm probably gonna get out and hustle again because that's what I do. That's what I did my whole life. And so that was always in the back of my mind. And then the second time, you know, it was it was hard because I had my daughter, she's 10 now. She's about, yeah, and my son, he's 4, right? And I started to realize like how my daughter, she was 2 weeks old when I got locked up the first time, right? And I got out and she was like 4, almost 5. And then I've been gone her whole life, and that really fucked me up. And my son, he's 4 now, and he was born while I was in county jail. So I didn't get to meet him until just like a month ago. So I've been locked up all my their lives, you know what I mean? Like they know me, they love me, and I love them, and I'm in their life when I can be, and I try to be there as much as I can in any way I can from but I can barely take care of myself right now.
What was your mentality going through the prison system, and what was your routine like?
My mentality, you just try to get into survival mode and you adjust, to your surroundings. And I just wanted to, the second time I was in prison, that's when I really wanted to become a better person. And my routine, your day is planned for you in prison. You wake up, go to the chow hall, come back, you know, do your programming, or you go to work, go to school, or maybe you're in a treatment or something like that all day, and then go to lunch, dinner. Like your whole day is planned out. You're told what to do, when to do, and how to do it. And then you do that day after day, week after week, month after month until the years go by, and then time flies by in there. It's fucking crazy. Like there's actually like a guy I know, he talks about he coins it as I think he says the temporal mechanics of incarceration or some weird shit like that. But it's a cool study, like phenomenology and shit like that, why we experience the things we experience when we're in there, and how time is different in
Right.
that place.
Nice. At what point did you realize you wanted to change your life
Um,
before being released? Sorry.
at what point? I would say what made me really want to change was when I took a psychology class, right? And it was Freudian theory, how he says that your children look for either their father in a man or their mother in a woman, And I was like, oh, that's some sick shit, right? But
Yeah.
then I realized that the mother of my children was just like my mother in a way. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, there's
Some
some real
proof.
shits,
Some proof is
And
real.
at that point, right, I realized like I need to become the man that I would like my daughter to be with someday. I don't want her to be with somebody like, a fucking hustler selling dope. So at that point, when I realized that my daughter may look for me in a man someday, that's when I really wanted to change.
Yeah. Yeah. What was your mindset during your final days in prison, knowing you were about to be released?
Um, that was rough. I made it to a minimum security unit, and we were able to go out in the community and like cut trees and shit, basically community service, similar to a STS county jail shit. But it was very nerve-wracking for me, because I was doing good. I got accepted for this other early release program, which is work release, and I was scared that something bad was gonna happen and some shit was gonna go bad because you know how it is. Like, I think it might just have something to do with our intergenerational trauma, because when things are going so good, you're like, why is shit going so good? And then you're worried that something's gonna. So I was worried about getting sent back inside and losing all my programming and But I tried to prepare myself as best as I could mentally and physically, spiritually.
Did you feel prepared to re-enter society? And what helped with that preparation?
Um, I tried my best to prepare to re-enter society, by learning as much as I could. And I actually, what helped me a lot was obtaining my AA degree while inside, taking these classes through the TREC program, which is transformation and reentry through education and community. It's a HEP program, what they call HEP. It's a higher education in prison. So that helped a lot.
Nice.
What was your first day like? Oh,
And what surprised you? What surprised you the most?
Um, it was crazy being out, man. Like the first day, it was fucking nuts. Like just being out and being around people, different people, and everybody has on different clothes. Like that was fucking crazy. Because inside, you're like everybody wears the same shit as you, and then but you're out, and then but then I still had this kind of prison mentality my first day out. I remember going to Walmart, right? I'm pushing my cart and I'm fucking nervous as fuck. Just the social anxiety, looking everywhere, pushing the cart and I see this dude and he's looking at me. And me being in my prison mentality, I'm like, start meeting what the fuck's this motherfucker looking at? But then he probably wasn't even looking at me, but my mindset was like that. And then going down the fucking hygiene aisle at Walmart, that was rough.
yeah.
Going down there and I'm like, what the fuck do I buy? Because in prison you get like a limited option. You just
The
feel,
suave.
yeah, you fill in some bubbles and that's it. But I go down there and I'm like, I don't know what the fuck to get. So that was the first day out was rough. It was hard.
Having so many options to choose from.
Yeah.
What were your biggest obstacles you faced in the first few weeks after being released?
Um, for me, it was just trying to navigate the city life. Res boy. I grew up on the res, we don't got like down here in the metro area, there's so many trying to figure out how to use the public transportation, getting on the bus. I remember my first time taking the bus, I was supposed to go east towards St. Paul, but my dumbass got on the west bus and I'm heading towards downtown Minneapolis. So that was rough, like having to learn how to take the city buses in the first few weeks. So that was hard, and actually just trying to adjust and find a new schedule,
Yeah.
because my days weren't planned out anymore. So I'm like bored out of my fucking mind. You know, Guys are smoking cigarettes. I smoked cigarettes for like a month and I got out and I quit. And yeah, that was rough the first
Did
few
you
weeks.
did you find housing or a job?
Um,
And what was that like? Was it hard?
yeah, it took me I think about a month and a half, maybe 2 months to get a job. I actually got a job as a student worker at Metro State University, and that's where I go to school at. Housing, I was at the halfway house, right now I'm, living with my auntie. She's very supportive of me, so but I would like to get my own housing someday. That's still in the works right now.
How did people treat you once they knew you had been incarcerated?
Um, they come off as a little, they're like, oh shit, you've been in prison
Yeah.
because society, they see these shows like Locked Up Abroad, and they think like all prisons are like that, but that's just like a facade to try to, portray this. But yeah, once they knew I was incarcerated, they were a little skeptical at first, and, a little iffy, but then once they got to know me for me, they were like, oh, okay. But yeah, society always has this stigma on or this preconceived notion of people who have been to prison are justice impacted individuals. But me, I don't hide that from anybody. I tell people I've been to prison and I've been through, this rough patch in my life, and I kind of embrace it in a way because if I didn't go through all that, I wouldn't be where I'm at today.
Yeah. What's something you wish people understood about formerly incarcerated individuals?
That we're human beings, like we're people. And sometimes, in the carceral state, you get dehumanized. You get they give you this number. Mine was 246,968. My OID number, and I was dehumanized to this number known as, inmate 24698 or King. They call me King, and so you're basically dehumanized, and I just want we're human beings, and it's a crazy process. Like when you're in there, you get dehumanized to the point where you kind of disconnect from the outside world, and you just don't really care. It's hard,
Yeah.
you know.
We spoke about you being released and how that felt. Do you think the prison system does enough to prepare people for life after being released or after release?
No, they don't. It's more, they try to say they have these rehabilitative or rehabilitation, or these institutions. They say they got this, and this, and they're trying to, fix people or get them to think different, and but it's more crippling to people because I've seen guys get out and they can't even make a phone call. They don't know how to, use this. They're it's hard to use technology when you first get out
Yeah.
because shit changes so fast and it's hard to catch up, and that's like so it's more rehabilitative than rehabilitative. There's not enough programming in there to help guys adjust and re-enter society.
What would you change about the reentry process if you could?
Um, my approach would be like a holistic approach or a community-based approach. Say I had one of my brothers get out of prison, right? And I knew he was getting out. I'm like, all right, bro, well, I'm gonna get you a little care package. I went and bought him a pair of shoes. I bought him a pair of J's, and he was cool, with that. I got him a pair of shoes, all the essentials like socks, t-shirts, couple pair of shorts, jeans, whatever. And but that's how I would approach reentry is actually
Or
letting people know like, hey, here's
preparing
this.
for
Yeah,
your life skills or
yeah,
like life skills after prison.
yeah. Just
Yeah.
letting people know that you're there and that you care.
Uh, We're speaking on incarceration and being released, and after being released, there is a process of that after release, and that's either parole, ISR. Um, there's other programs too, house arrest, monitor. Um, were there any policies or rules that made reentry harder for you?
Yeah, when I was in the halfway home on my work release, work release is an early release program that you can earn when you're in there if you do good and you do all the right shit, complete all your programming. But I was on work release and I was at this halfway home, and the Department of Corrections has this policy where they say that you need a landline to wherever you go. And us as indigenous people, we go inside a sweat lodge, right? And sometimes they're out in the woods. There's no how the fuck is there supposed to be a landline inside of a sweat lodge,
Yeah.
So this policy or these policies are very oppressive against American Indian spirituality. They have colonialism ingrained within them, and it's very oppressive and it's crazy.
How has college changed the way you see yourself?
College, it's a path to self-empowerment. It helped me get where I'm at today. I never thought that I would be where I'm at, but college has helped me, as I'm an undergrad right now and I'm about to graduate with my bachelor's, but I've accomplished a lot. I actually got like a little article published in the Minnesota Reformer. I wrote about the overrepresentation of indigenous people within the homeless population. We make up less than 2% of this state's total population, yet our people make up about 20% of the homeless population, or the houseless, or however you want to phrase that term. But that's crazy to me. Like we're significantly, disproportionately overrepresented. But I got published in that, and then I was actually at the Capitol. I got to go to the state Capitol, fucking Colonizer Hill, and advocate for this bill. About This bill was about for funding for Native American low income housing, specifically for American Indians, it said. But college has helped a lot, man. Like I learned a lot. I learned that about citizen advocacy, or the power of a citizen advocate. Like, bro, like we can come together and change shit as a, collectively. Like, people watch politics on the news about national politics, and they think that they follow politics because they watch this shit. But it's actually like called political hobbyism, and it's like the real politics are happening right in our backyard. And we can make change as who we are. We can go and talk to legislators and tell them how we feel about something, and they'll listen. And it's up to them whether or not they want to do something about it. But
How do you plan on to use your degree to make a difference?
my degree, well, my dream is to open a Native American and culturally based halfway home, specifically for reentry. So, our people don't have to experience what I experienced through these oppressive policies that are enforced by the Department of Corrections. But I want to give back in any way I can, whether that's through advocacy work, or, you know, building this halfway house. And I want to try to make a difference within indigenous people in reentry, and try to help them reconnect to the culture and find purpose in life. And I want to try to help them stay out. I
Yeah,
want to help our people in any way I can.
nice. What's next for your future?
Well, right now I'm working on my capstone project, which is the the end of your degree, and I'm researching how culturally responsive programs are basically the culture can impact the outcome of the reentry process, right? I'm researching these articles, and I did a literature review, and I've found some pretty cool shit. You know, there's this article out of Canada, and Canada is way ahead of the game in Indigenous studies, but it spoke of how the Indian agent was replaced by the penal ethos, and they're connecting these things to the overrepresentation of indigenous people in incarceration. But anyway, I'm doing all this research on indigenous people in reentry. Basically, I want to I think my research question is, how can indigenous people rebuild their lives after incarceration or displacement? And through my lived experience, I know how impactful our culture can be. So I'm actually in the process of writing a 20-page research paper that I'm going to use for my writing sample to graduate school. I'm applying to the University of Minnesota for their PhD program in American Indian Studies. So like, because I would love to teach someday, that's my dream, because I know how, when I learned about the history of colonialism and the forced assimilation process and the history of our people, that's when I found my healing, because I realized at that point that intergenerational trauma, historical trauma, whatever you want to call it, is a real thing. You know what I mean? That's when I realized. I looked around, thought about my family. I'm like, oh, that's why my mom and dad are the way they are. That's why my grandma and grandpa, my whole family is the way they are. Like, because of this historical trauma. And I thought about myself, and I'm like, oh, that's why I am the way I am is because of past traumatic experiences. So, but yeah, my future, I'm applying for the PhD program. I'm also going to apply for the MPH program, which is a Master's in Public Health. I believe that there needs to be more native-led research to help build culturally responsive programming, you know, and if that doesn't work out, I'm also going to apply for the MPNA at Metro State University. The MPNA is a master's in public and nonprofit administration. So like that's my fallback plan, and I feel like that degree would be perfect for my halfway house goal. And but yeah, education, is my future, and I know how a lot of our people don't do education, and I believe that it stems from the forced assimilation process of the boarding school era when indigenous people were institutionalized, right? Where the institutionalization of indigenous people, right? And I'm gonna get a little crazy here and speak on epigenetics, right?
Uh-huh.
Epigenetics, there was this study done about rats, right? They put this rat in this lab and they let out a certain smell and they shocked them, you know, and every time that smell came out, they would shock them. But anyway, like the grandkids of the rat that went through that, right? When they exposed these grandchildren of this rat to this smell, these them rats freaked out and they didn't know why. But that is what like epigenetics it is from you know, past traumatic experiences, and that's what a lot of our people deal with. But what I'm getting at here is that's why I believe some of our people are scared to go to college or even treatment, because it's an institution, which is you think about it, boarding schools were
Yeah.
institutions. And but yeah, it's just yeah, that's my future, is just education.
Me personally, I know you a little bit, but for the viewers, could you give me kind of a rundown on your family tree, starting with your grandparents, great grandparents, and grandparents, and their significance to Red Lake and their bloodline throughout Red Lake Reservation?
Yeah, my great grandparents on my mom's side were both from Red Lake, and on my grandma's side, my great grandparents, my great grandmother was from White Earth, and my great grandfather was from Red Lake, from the Panema area.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically, my whole family comes from Red Lake, and yeah, I'm full blood Red Lake, even though I'm light complected.
Yeah.
That's because of when Red Lake rewrote the Constitution in 2020, they made anybody enrolled on or before the 1950 base roll automatically full blood, which made my grandfathers and grandfathers on both sides automatically full blood, even though my great grandfather on my mother's side was half Irish.
Mm,
So I'm the whitest full blood Ojibwe you'll ever meet.
that's right. That's right. So, like, with that being said, do you think that helped out the reservation or hindered it? And if so, in what way?
Um, I'll have to say it helped the reservation a lot, because from my perspective, blood quantum is a colonial construct. It was created by the federal government, which is mathematical ethnocide.
Mm,
When they created blood quantum, it was a way to wipe our people out on paper. So I believe it helped our people a lot because the reason they did that was because a sociologist came to the reservation and said that within 100 years, the number of enrolled band members will be depleted to the hundreds. And I have this theory in my head that if there's no more enrolled band members, then there's nobody to claim the land. And then
Right.
that's when the government can say, well, you have no band members. This
Mhm.
land is ours now. But that's just a theory that's in my head.
Okay, I like that. So recently I just seen some stuff about a plane being repossessed, flying over the lake. And a lot of people saying this and that about the natives don't own the air. What's your take on that?
I was actually just reading about that today myself, and it was because back in the day, the military used to do
Bomb drills,
drills,
right?
yeah, drills on the reservation within the reservation air. But I think it was in 1978, Red Lake passed a resolution to where planes can only fly an altitude of 20,000 feet above the reservation,
Hmm.
basically. And so that's how that came about. It was I mean, just imagine like these white people that are so upset about it, right?
Hmm.
How would they feel if the military was doing drills in their backyards right over their homes? Like they don't look at it, they don't see it from that way though. Like
Yeah.
they need to think about that. Like how would they feel if they were trying to live peacefully off the land, and just trying to survive and they had military planes flying over above their heads all day. You know?
Right, like their farmland
Yeah,
and into the water that runs their farmland and
yeah.
stuff like that. Yeah. So I see, you know what I mean? Good point from our people. I mean, so growing up on a reservation, now residing in the Twin Cities, I had a question about our culture and your knowledge of it and when and where it all started for you.
Um, my grandmother actually instilled culture and spirituality within me at a young age. She had me dancing at powwows since I was able to walk. She
Hmm.
had me, she got me into a lodge when I was about 3 years old. I don't remember, but they always used to tell me a story about when I first got into the lodge and they shut the door, I must have asked for my bottle. That's how young I was.
Yeah.
And then, she got me my Indian name. That's such a, like, I think when I was a baby, my white was Margaret Porter
Hmm.
from Panema. And, I was raised in a traditional way. I was immersed in the culture. And then, substance use came into my life
Hmm.
as a teenager and I disconnected. And, yeah, and then after going through the growing up and, experiencing the things that I went through, the carceral systems, everything, I was lost because I was so disconnected from the culture,
Hmm.
and then I actually reconnected while I was in the prison this last time.
Okay. So you brought up the that you have your Indian name. What is your Indian name? And from your knowledge, what does your Indian name mean?
It's Bizihikiwag, and it means my wet aunt told me it means little herd of buffalo.
Mhm.
So, and I've had that name since I was a baby.
Have you ever asked anybody to kind of break it down to you, like what that means or what it could mean?
I've never looked into it that deep, but I know that in Panema, there the dialect there is very
Mhm.
it's unique. It's more they have a very unique dialect in Panema, from my understanding. I could
Mhm.
be wrong, but that's just what some people say.
Yeah, I've heard it. Some parts of it come from Canada, and
Hmm.
then a little bit lower down comes from the more southern part of
Yeah.
Ojibways. So I get what you're saying there. What like talking about Panema? What's your knowledge on Panema and what's the significance to Red Lake?
I honestly don't know much about Panema, but I know that my grandmother, Diane Kane,
Mm-hmm.
Diane Badbear, that she changed her name when she got married. But her family, my that side of my family comes from Panema, and I know that they were all immersed in the culture. They used to net fish, and live off the land. And my grandma used to talk about the cabin that they grew up in. She said that they literally had dirt floors,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how they grew up. But other than that, I don't know much about Panema at all.
Yeah, tar paper shacks and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I remember growing up seeing a few tar paper shacks in the West End area. If
yeah,
you're from Red Lake, you know where West End is, and I remember seeing them at a young age. So I understand that it was housing for us back in the day. Um, okay, so about that. Another question for me would be, where do you see it taking you from this moment moving forward, and any plans to instill it in the youth and adults alike?
yeah. The culture definitely. Like, I know the culture saved my life.
Hmm.
Because we're still dealing with intergenerational trauma to this day due to the forced assimilation process. The boarding school era when they tried to ethnically cleanse our people, and we got very
Excuse me, sorry.
disconnected from the culture, and how I believe that a lot of us are still struggling with identity of who we are as Native people because we're trying to fit into this society where we feel we don't belong. Because I know that was from my personal experience, that was what I went through was this identity crisis growing up. I was raised traditional, but then I disconnected, you know, from the culture and tried to become somebody I wasn't
Right,
to try to fit into this society.
right.
But after my reconnection is when I found my purpose and belonging. But I believe that we definitely need to get the youth more involved and more adults. Like we need to come together as a community and spread our culture because I believe that our culture is what's gonna save all of our people and help bring healing.
Oh, for sure. I think the same. So with that being said, what's your thoughts on language revitalization and the immersion schools that are popping up around the country? And I've heard a big thing about um, this tribe in Hawaii that actually retaught pretty much a majority of the island, if not all the island, their language back. They got that back. So what's your take on that? You could start anywhere you'd like.
Yeah, I remember reading about that school in Hawaii. That's pretty cool how they taught all them kids from a young age. It's there's studies done that show that if you teach a kid a second language between 0 to 8, their brains are like sponges, and they're just able to soak everything up. And, they could be bilingual and speak two different languages. But yeah, that school in Hawaii was pretty cool. I remember Anton Troyer talks about that a lot in his books.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but yeah, the youth, like things are getting better, a lot better than they were.
Mm-hmm.
But language saves lives. I mean, I had this Ojibwe professor, Bradley Harrington,
Mm-hmm.
who's been teaching me, and he talks about how the language saved his life.
Yeah.
Because he's a justice impacted individual,
Mm-hmm.
and he said reconnecting with the culture and the language actually saved his life. So yeah,
I like that. I like that answer a lot. So back to the immersion school. What do you think about the one back home in Red Lake?
I think it's great, man. It's a beautiful thing, just having that building or that school to
Mm,
teach the youth about the language and the culture, because they're the next generation. They're the ones that are going to be carrying things on for everybody. Like we can influence them in positive ways and they can make change that we couldn't, you know, that we're still trying to make. They're going to be the ones that are going to be actually making a difference.
So, do you think that in a child's eyes, that it's more easier for them to learn from someone closer in their age bracket opposed to learning from elders?
Um,
Might be a touchy, you know what I mean, a little touchy subject, but I just would like your opinion on it.
well, I know from my personal experience, my grandmother taught me to always respect my elders,
Mm,
right? And it didn't matter how much older they were than me, if they were an adult or if they were Gichiayag,
mm,
a great being that we call them in our language. But I don't think it matters as
okay,
long as we're teaching.
for sure. Okay, so this kind of ties into the next question I got. So what would you like to see from the youth and the elders to bridge that gap in order to bring the culture back, bring the language back, the hunting ways, the how you respect everything and stuff like that.
I think that the youth should try their best to connect with elders. Like that's the best thing that I could say about that, because there's elders out there that do want to share their knowledge, and it just there needs to be more community, more coming together
Mhm,
all around.
for sure. Do you think that's kind of like hard being a younger child, adolescent, into young adult, being set in their ways and being kind of shy to ask because maybe they feel they should know already, and then also the elders being a little set in their ways, being stubborn, not going out to the youth.
Um, well, I know that from my experience, like I was always afraid to approach an elder
Mm,
and ask, to learn the language. And then I don't want to really speak on how the elders act because I don't know
mm,
nowadays. I've been gone a while,
yeah.
but I know growing up they were always really responsive to it.
Hmm.
And but nowadays society is different than what it was.
For sure.
Like this generation, it's crazy. Crazy because I remember growing up, if I was younger, I would, and there was an elder or an older person, I would stand up and give my seat to
For
that
sure.
elder,
For sure.
But nowadays, like, you don't see kids doing that
Mm,
anymore. It's sad.
yeah.
I know they're there and they would probably be more than happy to teach
Hmm.
if somebody's willing to learn.
For sure. I like that for sure. I like that. Okay, so hmm, since being home from your incarceration, I know you previously touched on this before, but what have you accomplished thus far and continue to work towards as of right now?
Well, right now I'm still in college. I'm still working on my education. Still, in the process of writing a 20-page research paper, my capstone project, and that actually
Nice.
I'm researching how culture plays a part in the reentry process.
Okay.
Through my lived experience, that culture is my foundation
Yeah.
to being getting where I want to be in life. You know.
So me myself personally, I didn't go to college. I started to, but kind of fell away from working too much. How to provide for yourself, provide for others, and stuff like that. It kind of got away from me, but that's neither here nor there. Capstone. You said capstone. Is that something that a lot of people in college? That's something that they have to write throughout their process, or is it a certain degree that you have to do it in?
Yeah, it's your when you're an undergraduate, that's your senior project.
Okay.
Basically, you go through college for 4 years and you learn all these tools, you learn how to do research, and then you learn how to navigate research databases and how to tell the difference between an academic article and like gray literature and popular literature, and how you can use all of these tools and come together and do your own research. You basically compile everything you learned, bring it together, and then what interests you, you write about it, and then you propose like a thesis statement, and then you bring in data or research to how
You
it
can
ties.
to
Yeah,
what you got there.
yeah,
So the article, the paragraph it came from, the page even,
yeah, yeah,
the author,
yeah.
the things like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, all right. With those topics that you covered, what would you like the viewers to know about yourself, morals and beliefs specifically?
Um, I try my best to walk with the seven grandfather teachings.
Mhm.
I try to incorporate those into my daily life as best as I can. And I always try to be a better person than I was, and then integrity, that word integrity means
Mhm.
knowing and doing the right thing when nobody's looking.
For sure.
I always try to do the right thing no matter what, and help where I can. And I just try to live a humble life, you know, and I do, I put in the work with education and all that. And just, I want to lead by example for sure, and hopefully inspire others to help them realize that college is possible, a higher education. It's a path to self-empowerment. I spoke on this yesterday with Makwa about the American Indian Scholars Program. Right now, the state of Minnesota pays all your tuition and all your fees up to the equivalency of a bachelor's degree. So, it's we can get a free bachelor's degree right now, and a lot of people should take advantage of that. We're underrepresented at higher education institutions as it is.
Do you have to have a certain GPA?
To get into school.
No, for the specific thing you just mentioned.
Oh, the AISP, yeah, the American Indian Scholars Program. I think they want you to maintain like a 2.0 or 2, basically just passing grades.
Okay, so pretty much like a C average.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I understand you hold a position for the school you attend. Would you like to explain what that entails and what benefits you see you'll gain from the position?
Yeah, my current role, I am I work for the TREC program at Metro State University. My job title is TREC Academic Transitions Vista Project Coordinator. I got this long, stupid title,
Mhm.
which doesn't make sense to me, but apparently, it's supposed to make me feel good. I don't know, but
That's it. That's it.
I mean, it's just a title, bro.
Yeah.
But what I do is, I help guys getting out of the carceral system who have been in the TREC program, which is a higher education and prison program.
Hmm.
And when they're out and if they want to continue their education, I meet with them, one on one. I'll help them. I'll give them a tour of the campus and show them where everything is and get them a laptop through the TREC program. And basically, I help guys navigate the academic system that's in place and helping them navigate what we call the TREC program is academic reentry,
Hmm.
and then my job is to build capacity with within the TREC program, but I've been more focused on peer-to-peer support,
Okay.
you know.
I mean, from what I've just heard, you should honestly feel good about yourself for doing that. There's not a lot of young men like yourself that are actually, you know what I mean, putting the work in to do something like that. Um, I've noticed in my years being alive that it's I'm trying to think of how to properly word it without, you know what I mean, disrespecting people, but everybody's out for self. And from what you just said to me, that doesn't sound like the position that you hold. So I, greatly respect you for that and you holding that position. And I'm really happy that they chose you for that position.
Yeah, I know what you mean though about everybody is out for themselves. It's called an individualistic society. That's what American mainstream white America, that's their motto is individualism. Basically, you only care about yourself. You see, back in the day, our people were a collectivistic society.
Hmm.
We were a community. We all looked out for one another, and, but this individualism is colonialism at its finest.